Okay, in this exciting episode, we're going to take that this building we had before, which was we had set up in a parametric-ish kind of way. Let's do a few more floors. That'll do. It's looking pretty expensive now. Sort of Frank Gehry-ish and bit, but it's not quite expensive enough. This facade, I mean, each of these are not coplanar and they'd be triangulation, so it would be pretty expensive. But what would help us really boost the price of this building would be to have each of these with some sort of aperture that changed based on a relationship with another object. So what we can do is, and I've made this as a reference copy, and then what we could do is we could do an edit poly on top. Let's go into, we'll click on animate so it will remember all of these steps. I'll select all of the polygons and we'll do an inset. We want it to be inset by polygon, and let's do a nice mean little punch window in that. Okay, we could do a, see if a push would do anything exciting. Oh yeah, that's not too bad. So we want to push them out a little bit, and yep. A little bit more. And then if we do a delete mesh, they become little holes. Yeah. Okay. And then what we want to do is, now in this particular circumstance, because we've done the delete mesh, it seems to want us to do a edit poly, because when we go to do this next step, which is use the morpher, it gets a bit confused if you've deleted the selected polygons, because it's thinks that there's nothing selected. So just adding another edit poly kind of cleans it up, but it forgets about that you've deleted this these polygons. Okay, and then so the next step is to do a morpher, and what this does, normally you'd use it for animating faces and stuff, but in this case we're going to animate this facade. So what we can do is, it's got a bunch of empty morph targets. What we want to do is, instead of picking from a scene, so normally you'd have a row of faces pulling different expressions, we just want to use the same object, so we'll capture the current state. Let's call this closed windows, accept, and then we go back down the stack, and because we hopefully remembered to click on animate, we can just go into the settings and adjust the openness of these panels, something like that. Okay, and then jump up to the morpher where it says empty. We want to, in the sort of second one, we want to capture the current state, and we'll call this open window and accept. And then if we've done it right, we should be able to go up to this number here and adjust that level. So that's the sort of percentage between the open and closed. So that's kind of neat, and you could animate that as the whole building opens and shuts. Or we could have a relationship with another object. I like to have relationships with spheres. Let's add a couple of spheres. And we can use what's called a volume select, which if we go into here, underneath the morpher, if we do a volume select, what we can do is pick on, we want to use a mesh object. Instead of none, we want to use this sphere here. We want to use vertex, so vertex selection, and then we'll use soft selection, because hopefully that will give us a good effect. Alright, so we need to adjust the morpher to have, yeah, there we go, 100%. So now, as I move this sphere around, you can see that the facade might be clearer in other viewports. The facade will open or close depending on where the ball is. Trying to get a good idea of from this view actually. Okay, let's adjust the fall off a bit more. Yeah. If you wanted to have a relationship with another object, you can add another volume select, and again we'd say use vertice. We want to use a mesh object, and we'll use this sphere here. Again, we'll adjust the soft selection, and you'll might not be super clear because the form's quite kind of complicated, but what happens is as you move the other sphere around, it doesn't actually make any effect, because what happens with the volume select is it replaces by default, so it's replacing this other sphere, the first sphere. So what we can do is we can add or we can subtract, and might be, actually we could, let's try the invert. Let's try invert. So you can mess with these, but you can see how, you know, you can get this relationship between objects, proximity, multiple objects, driving apertures. I can't imagine what this would be useful for. I don't know. Other than making a building that's really expensive, I guess you could do something along the lines of something that responded to the sun as a kind of ball of sun moves past. And of course, if it's thesis and you only have a week left, don't forget to hit the shell modifier. And depending on who your supervisor is, you may or may not hit turbo smooth. But there you go. There's a oh, and this was the object underneath. You could stick a glassy material on the original. There you go. So there's my paralytic office building controlled by balls. Obviously things will chug a bit if you leave the turbo smooth on and start messing with things, but what else could you do? It'd be good to bake that colour into the surface, maybe. You could add, if you wanted a slightly less sort of circular shape, you could mess with some of the parameters in here. I won't. Oh, you could do a chamfer on them. Anyway, I think that's probably getting into the realms of a very expensive building. So I'm happy with that. It's mission accomplished. Okay.